You ever sit down in the quiet and realize your whole life has been about somebody else's survival? That was me. From the day our parents died, my world turned into a battlefield where I had no choice but to keep fighting, not for me, but for my little sister. Before I continue the story, kindly like, subscribe and tell us where you are listening from. She was only a child when death came knocking on our door. I was barely old enough to understand the weight of responsibility, but there I was, standing in front of a coffin too heavy for my small hands and a future that felt even heavier. People came around with promises, uncles swore they'd take care of us, neighbors said they'd look out for her. But promises are cheap, and when the crowd left and the noise of the funeral died, it was just me and her, staring at each other in that small, broken house. That night, when she cried herself to sleep, I made a silent vow. Whatever it took, she would never feel abandoned. Never. I was going to build her a life worth living, even if I had to dismantle mine piece by piece. So I started selling. At first, little things, old furniture, a motorbike, tools. Then bigger things, a piece of land my father left, a store my mother used to run. Each sale hurt, not because I loved the property, but because each one carried memories of our parents. But hunger doesn't care about memories. School fees don't care about grief. So I traded memories for meals, history for hope. And every time I came home with money, she smiled, and I told myself it was worth it. You need to understand something about sacrifice. It doesn't feel like heroism when you're living it. It feels like swallowing fire every day and pretending it's water. I worked jobs that drained the life out of me. Day labor, fixing cars under a sun that baked the ground, hauling loads for men who never bothered to learn my name. I slept on floors so she could have a bed. I ate leftovers so she could have meals. And every time I thought I had nothing more to give, I found a way to give again. Years rolled by. I watched her grow from a shy, fragile girl into a confident young woman. She was sharp, ambitious, and she had this laugh that used to echo in my chest like music. Every certificate she brought home felt like my own victory. She wore success like a crown, and I wore exhaustion like armor. But I didn't mind. Because every drop of sweat was building her future. And when she finally made it to university, I thought maybe, just maybe, I could breathe. But university wasn't cheap. You know what I did? I sold the last piece of my father's land. The one I swore I'd never let go. My heart broke when I signed the papers, but when she called me crying with joy because her tuition was paid, I told myself I had made the right choice. 4 years later, the call came, she was graduating. My sister, the same girl I carried on my back through storms, the same girl I shielded from hunger and shame, was finally walking across that stage. That moment wasn't just hers. It was mine too. And I wasn't going to let it pass quietly. So I planned the biggest party anyone in our family had ever seen. I called old friends, I rented a hall, I made arrangements that swallowed the little savings I had left. To outsiders, it looked reckless. But I didn't care. I wanted her to feel like royalty. Because in my heart, she was. That night, as I strung up lights and arranged the chairs, I kept replaying the years in my head. Every sacrifice, every tear, every long night. And it felt worth it. All of it. But here's the thing about life, it doesn't hand out happy endings so easily. Sometimes, just when you think you finally earned peace, it twists the knife deeper. At the party, I watched her smile and dance, surrounded by friends, professors, and colleagues. I felt proud. My chest was heavy with joy, but also, something else. A shadow. A whisper I didn't recognize yet. Because while I was celebrating her victory, while I was clapping and raising a glass in her honor, someone in that very crowd was holding a secret that would burn everything I had built, everything I had given, down to ashes. But in that moment, I didn't know. I was just the proud brother who believed loyalty ran both ways. I was the fool who thought blood was thicker than ambition. If only I knew what was coming. You know how every celebration has that one quiet moment where you step aside, just to take it all in. That night, during my sister's graduation party, I had one of those moments. The music was loud, the lights shimmered, laughter filled the air. She was at the center of it all, radiant, glowing in the success we had both fought for. And for the first time in years, I allowed myself to breathe. But peace is fragile. It breaks easier than glass. I was standing by the drinks table when her best friend walked up to me. You know the type, smiling on the outside, but with eyes that hold something sharp. She leaned in, her perfume thick in the air, and whispered words that turned the whole party into a blur. "She's planning to take you to court," she said. At first, I laughed. I thought she was joking. But the friend didn't smile. She leaned closer, her voice low and deliberate. "She thinks you've put everything in your name. The properties. The will. She feels cheated, and she's ready to fight for it." I froze. My heart beat so hard it felt like it might crack my ribs. I looked over at my sister, my little girl who was now dancing, laughing, surrounded by people who adored her. She looked so innocent, so oblivious. But behind that smile, was she plotting against me? I wanted to believe it was a lie, some twisted jealousy from her friend. But doubt has a way of planting roots the moment it touches soil. And that night, the seed was planted deep. I didn't confront her. No. Instead, I stood there and let the music pound in my ears while my mind replayed everything I'd done for her. Every coin I'd spent. Every drop of sweat I'd shed. Every sacrifice I'd made. And all I could think was, why? The friend didn't stop there. She told me my sister had been speaking with a lawyer already. That she'd been complaining to her professors about how unfair life had been, how I had trapped her by keeping the inheritance in my control. I swear, in that moment, the room spun. All my life, I had believed blood was sacred. That my sacrifices were building a bond that nothing could break. But the way her friend told it, I wasn't a brother, I was an obstacle. When the party ended, I walked home with her laughter still echoing in my ears, but it no longer sounded sweet. It sounded like betrayal. For 2 days, I didn't speak to her. She called me, once, twice, then 10 times. I couldn't pick up. What was I supposed to say? Hey, did you really plan to drag me into court after I gave you my whole life? No. I needed to be sure. So I started digging. Quietly. And what I found cut deeper than a knife. She had been meeting with professors, asking for advice. She had spoken to a lawyer, trying to build a case. She truly believed I had stolen everything, that I had written the will in my name and left her to work for scraps. The irony? She didn't know the truth. She didn't know that years ago, I had made sure most of the inheritance went to her. I wanted her to have security, to never question her worth. But she didn't see it that way. In her eyes, I was the villain. And here's the part that twists the knife, she never asked me. Not once. She didn't come to me like a sister, didn't trust me enough to talk. She went to outsiders, to strangers in suits and gowns, people who had never shed a single tear for her. She trusted them more than she trusted me. Do you know how that feels? To build a castle for someone, only for them to accuse you of locking them out. To sell your soul just to buy their future, and then be treated like a thief. I spent sleepless nights staring at the ceiling, my phone lighting up with her calls, 30 calls in 2 days, maybe more. Each one a reminder of her desperation. Each one a plea I refused to answer. Because by then, I wasn't sure if she was calling as a sister, or as a threat. And that's when the thought hit me, if she was willing to take me to court, then she was ready to destroy me. And if she was ready to destroy me, why should I keep protecting her? That's the moment everything changed. I started thinking about our cousin, the one everyone forgot. The boy who lost his parents even earlier than we did. The one who had to fight through life with nothing, while my sister lived in comfort thanks to me. I thought about how quiet he had been all these years, never demanding, never accusing, just surviving with the little he had. And suddenly, I saw a way to make things right. If my sister thought I had taken everything, then maybe it was time to show her what it really meant to lose. If she wanted a war over inheritance, I would give her one. But I wasn't going to fight her in court. No, I was going to fight her with the same weapon she wanted to use against me. The will. I still remember sitting in that lawyer's office late at night, the air heavy with the smell of ink and old paper. My hands shook as I signed the documents, transferring everything, land, houses, even the small shop, to our cousin. The lawyer looked at me like I was crazy, but he stamped the papers anyway. When I walked out of that office, the city lights felt colder. But inside, I carried a fire. My sister thought she was ready for battle. She had no idea the battlefield had already been rewritten. And that's when I decided, I wasn't going to be her stepping stone. I was going to be the wall she crashed into. You ever notice how revenge doesn't start with fire, it starts with paper? People think revenge is dramatic, explosive, bloody. But mine began in a lawyer's office, under dim fluorescent lights, with a pen trembling in my hand. I'd made up my mind, if my sister wanted to see me as her enemy, then I was going to play the role better than she could ever imagine. I called a lawyer I trusted, not one of the flashy, sharp-suited men who fed her lies, but an older man who'd been with our family for years. The kind of man who knew our parents, who knew what sacrifice looked like. When I explained what I wanted, he stared at me for a long time. "Are you sure?" he asked. His voice carried the weight of a warning, but also, curiosity. And I said the words I had never said out loud before, "She doesn't deserve it." So we began. The will was already structured to favor her heavily. Years ago, I had insisted on that. But that day, I tore it apart. Piece by piece, I signed everything over to our cousin, the forgotten one. The boy who'd lost his parents before he even knew their faces. The one who had grown up scraping by, while I shielded my sister from every hardship. Do you see the irony? The very thing my sister accused me of, hoarding everything for myself, I had never done. But that night, I made it true. I took it all away from her. The lawyer prepared the documents. The pages were cold, clinical, emotionless. Yet every word was a blade cutting her name out of the future. I signed slowly, deliberately, like each stroke of ink was a sentence I was carving into stone. The pen scratched across the paper, and I imagined her face when she would discover what I'd done. That thought kept my hand steady. It wasn't just about punishing her. No. It was about balance. Justice. She had been ready to drag me into court over something I hadn't even done. So I gave her something real to fight for, a wound she could never stitch back. And the cousin, oh, the cousin. I couldn't stop thinking about him. He was living in a rented room barely big enough for a mattress. Working shifts that chewed up his youth and spat him out exhausted. He'd never asked me for anything. Never called me crying in the night. Never accused me of stealing what wasn't mine. If anyone deserved a chance at a new life, it was him. And I was going to give it to him, with the very assets my sister thought she was entitled to. The documents were finalized in less than a week. Signed. Stamped. Sealed. A chain of custody so airtight, not even the cleverest lawyer could untangle it. The properties, the land, the shop, all of it, now under our cousin's name. And the best part? She didn't know. Not yet. I carried the knowledge like a secret weapon, hidden under my smile whenever she called. 30 times she rang. 30 voicemails filled with sobs and apologies, her voice cracking as she begged me to forgive her for whatever she thought she had done wrong. But I didn't answer. Not once. I let her drown in her own uncertainty. Because here's the thing, silence is louder than shouting. Silence makes people desperate. And desperation was exactly what I wanted her to feel. Nights were the hardest. I'd lie awake staring at the ceiling, listening to the hum of the fan, and my mind would replay everything. Her laughter at the party. Her friend's poisonous whisper. The look on my father's face the last time he spoke about family loyalty. I wondered if I was betraying his memory, or honoring it. But then I'd remember the image of her in court, standing there with her professors and her lawyer, ready to drag my name through the mud. And every doubt would turn to ash. I wasn't betraying my father. She was. I was just finishing the lesson he had started, that blood means nothing if loyalty is gone. So I waited. Days turned into weeks. My phone buzzed less and less. Word reached me that she was consulting more professors, trying to build her case. She thought she was preparing to corner me, to expose me. What she didn't know was that the battlefield had already shifted. She was fighting in the wrong war. And in the middle of all this, I paid a visit to our cousin. I'll never forget the way he looked when I told him. His eyes widened, his mouth opened, but no words came out. He tried to protest, to refuse, but I stopped him. This isn't charity, I told him. It's justice. You've been overlooked too long. You deserve this more than anyone. Tears filled his eyes as he hugged me, whispering gratitude over and over. For the first time in years, I felt like I was actually doing something right. And yet, there was a shadow in my chest. Because even as I smiled at our cousin, I knew my sister would see this not as justice, but as betrayal. And when the truth reached her ears, it would break her. But maybe that was the point. Maybe she needed to be broken, just to understand what it felt like to have everything taken away. Revenge isn't just about winning. It's about teaching. And I was about to give her the lesson of a lifetime. The documents were locked in place. The cousin was the new heir. My sister's calls had gone unanswered. All that remained was the inevitable confrontation, the day she would walk into my compound, armed with her professors and her lawyer, thinking she had me cornered. That day, she would learn the truth. That day, she would realize the will was no longer hers to claim. That day, she would understand the cost of betraying me. And I would be there, waiting, with silence sharper than any blade. You ever wait for a storm you know is coming? The kind where the clouds build up heavy, the wind goes still, and the silence itself feels dangerous. That was me. I knew she was coming. I didn't know when, but I knew. The calls had slowed. The messages became shorter, more frantic. Then came the silence. And silence always means one thing, preparation. I was sitting in my compound one afternoon, sharpening a knife I wasn't planning to use, when I heard the sound of tires on gravel. A sleek black car rolled in, the kind of car that doesn't come alone. My chest tightened. The storm had arrived. The doors opened, and out stepped my sister. Her face was pale, her eyes swollen like she hadn't slept in days. Behind her, 3 men followed, a lawyer, neat and smug with his briefcase, and 2 professors, stiff in their suits, their faces caught between pity and disapproval. They looked at me the way strangers look at a criminal before the trial begins. She didn't even say hello. She just walked straight up to me, tears brimming. "Brother," she whispered, her voice cracking, "please, don't do this to me." I stayed silent. The lawyer cleared his throat, trying to take control. He introduced himself, outlined their intentions. He spoke about fairness, about rights, about obligations. He painted a picture of me as the selfish older brother who had manipulated the inheritance for my gain. The professors nodded along, as if their very presence gave weight to the accusations. They were here to be witnesses, moral authorities, shields for her case. My sister dropped to her knees in front of me. "Please," she begged, her voice trembling. "I know I made mistakes. I thought you wanted to take everything from me. I was scared. But you're my only family. Forgive me. Give me a chance." 30 calls. 30 messages. 30 apologies. Now this. And yet, I felt nothing. No warmth. No pity. Just a cold wall inside my chest. Because when trust is broken, apologies sound like noise. The lawyer grew bolder when I didn't respond. He began listing properties, accounts, deeds, things he assumed were still in my name. He spoke about how the will could be challenged, how a judge would surely see reason. His words were sharp, confident, but I could hear the arrogance underneath. That's when I stood up. Slowly. Deliberately. I walked inside, leaving them all frozen in the compound. When I returned, I carried a folder. Inside that folder were the documents that sealed everything. The new will. The transfer papers. The ink that had rewritten the future. I didn't say a word. I just placed the folder on the table between us. The lawyer frowned, opening it with a smirk that quickly died. His eyes scanned the pages, and I saw the color drain from his face. He flipped page after page, his fingers moving faster, desperate to find a loophole. But there was none. The professors leaned in, reading over his shoulder. Their brows furrowed. One of them adjusted his glasses, as if clarity would change the words on the page. But clarity only made it worse. And my sister, she just stared. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. She looked from the folder to me, her eyes wide with disbelief. You gave it away. To him. Her voice cracked on the last word, him. She meant our cousin. The one she had always overlooked. The one who had grown up invisible while she lived like a queen on my sacrifices. Yes, I finally said. My first word since they'd arrived. To him. The silence that followed was heavy. Even the air felt thick, like it was choking on the truth. The lawyer closed the folder, his face tight with defeat. This is airtight, he muttered. He looked at my sister, his tone blunt. There's nothing to contest. He's covered every angle. The professors exchanged glances, their moral outrage dissolving into awkward discomfort. They realized they weren't standing beside a victim. They were standing beside a fool who had lost before the fight began. And my sister? She broke. She collapsed onto the ground, sobbing, clutching at the dirt like it could swallow her pain. Why? She screamed. Why would you do this to me? After everything? I'm your sister. I stared at her, my heart a battlefield of memories and betrayal. I thought of the nights I had gone hungry so she could eat. The days I had sold pieces of my soul to pay her school fees. The pride I had felt watching her graduate. And then I thought of her plotting behind my back, preparing to drag me into court without a second thought. You stopped being my sister, I said quietly, the moment you chose strangers over me. Her cries echoed through the compound, raw and broken. The lawyer tried to help her up, the professors mumbled hollow words of comfort, but none of it mattered. The war was over before it had even begun. They left in silence. She didn't look back. As the car rolled away, I stood there, holding nothing but the weight of my decision. Victory should have felt sweet. But as her sobs faded into the distance, all I felt was the emptiness of a man who had won a war at the cost of his own blood. That night, I sat alone in the compound, the folder still on the table. The papers were clean, precise, powerful. But my hands felt dirty. And I knew, this wasn't the end. The battle in court might be finished, but the war inside me had only just begun. You ever win a war and realize the victory feels worse than defeat? That was me. The day after my sister left my compound, silence clung to the house like smoke after a fire. I kept expecting her to call again, to try one last desperate plea. But she didn't. The 30 calls had ended. The storm had passed. And all that remained was wreckage. I walked through the compound that morning and noticed little things. The decorations from her graduation party still hung limp on the walls, the balloons half deflated, the streamers torn and fluttering in the wind. It was like the ghosts of celebration had refused to leave, mocking me with memories of the night when I thought we were unstoppable together. But those memories hurt now. They cut sharper than knives. I poured myself a drink and sat on the porch, staring at the sunrise. My cousin came by, the young man who had inherited everything. His eyes were wide, overwhelmed by the weight of what I'd given him. He tried to thank me, stumbling over his words, but I raised a hand to stop him. Don't thank me, I said. Just use it wisely. Don't make the same mistakes she did. He nodded, but I could see the fear in his eyes. Not fear of me, fear of failing. He understood this wasn't just an inheritance. It was a test, a burden wrapped as a blessing. When he left, I sat alone again. And the silence pressed in harder. That's when it hit me, I had spent my entire life building someone else's future. Every drop of sweat, every sacrifice, every sleepless night, all of it had been for my sister. She was supposed to be my legacy. She was supposed to carry our parents' name forward with pride. And in one reckless, selfish act, she had shattered it all. I thought about forgiving her. I really did. When I saw her crying in the dirt, begging with those swollen eyes, a part of me wanted to reach out. To tell her it was okay. To say we could rebuild. But another part of me, the part scarred by betrayal, refused. Because forgiveness without trust is just weakness. And I had been weak long enough. Still, the silence gnawed at me. It whispered questions I couldn't escape. Did I go too far? Did I destroy the only family I had left? Was revenge worth more than blood? I didn't have the answers. Maybe I never will. Days turned into weeks. Word spread quickly in town. People talked. Some said I was cruel, heartless, ungrateful. Others said I was strong, a man who refused to be used, a man who taught a harsh but necessary lesson. Everyone had an opinion. But none of them had lived my life. None of them had carried the weight I carried. One night, I found myself sitting by the old family chest where my parents' belongings were kept. I hadn't opened it in years. My hands shook as I lifted the lid. Inside were photographs, letters, small trinkets that smelled faintly of dust and time. I picked up one picture. It was me and my sister as children, standing barefoot in front of the house, grinning with innocence we didn't know we'd lose so soon. I stared at that photo for a long time. The boy I used to be, he would have given anything to protect the girl beside him. And he did. But the man I am now? He buried her the day she chose betrayal. I set the photo down and closed the chest, sealing away the ghosts of the past. You know, people think revenge is fire. That it burns bright and fierce, filling you with power. But the truth? Revenge is ash. It leaves you cold, gray, and empty when the flames are gone. Do I regret what I did? Sometimes. Do I feel justified? Absolutely. Do I miss her? Every single day. But here's the truth I've come to accept: blood might bind us, but loyalty is what keeps us alive. And when loyalty dies, family dies with it. Now, when I walk through the compound, I don't see her laughter in the halls anymore. I don't hear her footsteps rushing in late from campus. The house feels too big, too quiet, like it's holding its breath. Maybe one day she'll find her way back. Maybe one day I'll soften enough to listen. But until then, the will is sealed, the choice is made, and the ashes of what we once were scatter in the wind. And I live with it. Because that's what survivors do. So, to anyone watching this, remember this: sacrifice can build someone's world, but betrayal can tear it down in a single breath. Guard your loyalty. Value those who stand with you. And never, ever mistake blood for trust. Because sometimes, the deepest scars come not from strangers, but from the ones you'd die for. And that's how it ended. A life of sacrifice, shattered by betrayal, and sealed with revenge. But tell me, what would you have done in my place? Would you have forgiven her? Or would you have burned the bridge the way I did? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I want to hear your take. If this story gripped you, hit that like button to let me know. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next story. And if you know someone who loves suspense as much as you do, share this video with them. Your support keeps these stories alive. So go ahead, like, comment, share, and subscribe. Trust me, the next story will shake you even harder.